cherish all the time you spend, you tuned in to. It's time again to cherish all the time you spend, you tuned in to. It's the number one podcast. The topics of discussion when we broadcast. So all them artificial man jokes, we do it natural from the concrete to a public standpoint. Real, wherever you from, life is coexistence, but to know the real, you just gotta listen. Wherever you from, life is coexistence, but to know the real, you just
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the 52 Scott Podcast. I'm your host, K Money, and in the building with me, my co-host, Freddie G, Flash, and Comedian 96. Collectively, we are the Mind of Men. And you can find us on Twitter at 52 Scott Podcast, Instagram and Facebook, the 52 Scott Podcast. And if you're on YouTube, please don't forget to like and or subscribe. Welcome to another True Tuesday, fellas. This month just happens to be Mental Health Awareness Month. So I thought it'd be a good idea if we discuss, the differences between mental health and mental illness, which, believe it or not, is two different things. Mental health awareness is the ongoing effort to reduce the stigma around mental illness and mental health conditions. Again, I want to repeat that because, like I was saying earlier, mental health and mental illness are two different things. And, until I started researching this, I actually thought they were the same thing. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that probably feel just as I did.
Right.
So let me go ahead and repeat that again. Mental health awareness is the ongoing effort to reduce the stigma around mental illness and mental health conditions by sharing our personal experiences. The misconception about mental health and mental fitness, people often suffer in silence. Basically it's not being talked about enough.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of the main problems I feel that's going on.
Right.
I don't think it's being taken serious.
I agree.
For folks to actually get out. And maybe it's a lot of people that's probably embarrassed to talk about it.
Yeah, could be.
But let me explain the difference or the definition by the CDC, Center for Disease Control's definition of what the differences are between mental health and mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
According to the CDC, mental illness refers to conditions that affect a person's thinking, feeling, mood, or behavior.
Right. I see.
So
why are you looking over here?
No, I mean we all, according to those that definition, we all actually.
I know, but when you was reading, you was looking directly at me. That's all. I'm just saying.
Nah, what you got is something else. We gonna cover that one later though. Yours a little serious, bro. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that again. Mental illness refers to conditions that affect a person's thinking, feeling, mood, and or behaviors.
Right.
So this can include but are limited to depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia.
It's hot in here.
So that actually describes a lot of people we probably communicate with on a daily basis, believe it or not.
Still looking at me.
Nah, bro, you good. But yeah, that we actually interact with people that have these mental illnesses, not knowing.
Yeah.
And some folks probably, like I said earlier, are embarrassed to talk about it. May feel embarrassed to talk about it, which is why they don't mention it and feel that maybe there'll be stereotypes, especially ones with schizophrenia.
Right.
But if you don't understand what that is, then that obviously could cause one to not know how to deal with the person with the mental illness.
Right.
How do you guys feel about that, Comedian 96? I hate to ask you.
Yeah, because you had been looking over here anyway. So I just figured. So I do have one question. Mental health, mental illness. So health
Now, right
let's start with
not
health.
to cut you off, I hadn't said what mental health was.
Right. Right.
Let me go ahead and give you that definition
First,
based on the
because
CDC.
I want to see if it's the way I'm thinking. It's
Mental health reflects our emotional and psychological or social well-being.
Right.
okay.
So it's basically how we think and how we feel.
Correct. So that's the question I wanted to ask. So mental health, would that be considered something temporary? Like, for instance, something that may have caused you to your mental health to, like, maybe losing a job, losing a child, losing a loved one, and for that moment you're mentally not in the right place. To whereas mental illness is could be from an upbringing, the way you were raised, and it's set. The way you were raised could have been wrong, right? Just all the way wrong. But in your eyes, the way you were raised, it was right because that's the way you were taught.
Right. That's what you're used to. Right.
Yeah.
So you think it's right because that's what you're used to.
You're used to, exactly. But would you come to find out, later on, it's not right. But now you're considered, okay, something wrong with you. You thinking this way. You thinking, that would be considered a mental illness since it's prolonged and it's like over long periods of time. So where mental illness is like just a situation may have just gotten you.
Sadly to say, not to cut you off,
Yeah.
but you explained that very well. What you just explained was right to on top. I don't know if you knew that.
You didn't have to.
But I was going to ask you, man, did you have a course or something in this area?
No. Oh, God. No, I promise. I am, anybody know me, I am the happiest person. I'm happy, right? Now, however, I will banana cream pie you here and there. Shout out to Cat Wiz. Because I will say something that you might think is crazy, but in my mind, I think it's funny or okay, or I just think it's funny or okay. But it's funny to me, right? To you, you might not find it funny. But in my mind, it's funny because as a comedian, you just do stuff like that. You just, I mean, a lot of stuff that offend people. And for you listeners out there, if I say something, I'm never going to come back and apologize. So you can forget that. Don't even come. No, never. So, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's all right. You all right, bro. Well, one way to deal with these issues is to talk about it more and more and to educate folks, which can help one understand, but I think we all do deal with a mental illness at some point in our life. And like you were mentioning, Comedian 96, you were wondering if mental health is a temporary thing.
Right.
Or if it's a long-lasting issue.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where talking about it and getting educated on it would help folks totally understand it a lot better, because it's a very serious issue that's going on around in America.
Right.
I could recall watching the news occasionally, and you'll hear a story where the police are called for a welfare check.
Yeah.
And they're going in, and at the end of the story, this person got shot because they didn't understand, that there was a mental issue going on.
Right.
So training, I think, will also be important for these law enforcement that's supposed to be protecting and serving. But at the end of the day, ended up murdering somebody that had a mental issue.
Yeah. Now that makes me want to say, can you identify? How do you identify a person that have a mental illness or mental health issues? Can you really identify? You can't.
You can't. Let me tell you why. I'm gonna give you. This is a true story. It's funny. I'm sorry, but it's funny. But it is a true story. I was at work one time downtown. I worked downtown, and this is when I very first started working downtown. And they had like a tunnel system. So basically, you can move through the city of downtown through the tunnels. You can go to access the restaurants, back to your job. So I was in the tunnel and I got lost. So I stopped this guy. He was tall, probably about 6'5", 6'6", had a suit on. And I asked him, I said, hey, man, I'm lost. I just need to find the McDonald's and I'll be all right. And the guy turns to me and he says, man, McDonald's is that way. You turn that way, turn left, and then go right there, and you'll see it on your right-hand side. It's like perfect. That same guy then turned to the corner to no one, just up in the top corner and started cussing for no reason. What you say to me? I'll beat you. I was like, oh. Now, mind you, the tunnel's packed at lunchtime.
Right.
So
it's
not only is he crazy,
Yeah.
I'm crazy too because I was talking to him. But I'm not crazy. It just looked that way. So you can't identify because the man looked normal.
Right.
I mean, he had a suit on and everything.
Right, exactly.
But when the police came and got him, then you knew.
Yeah.
And then they got there fast.
Yeah.
So shout out to HPD. But they got there fast because they got him out the tunnel. But you can't tell.
No,
Sometimes
you
you just
can't.
can't. They'll have a normal conversation.
And that's what makes it a really serious issue, like K Money was saying earlier, because you can't tell. It could be the person right next to you, wherever you at, in the grocery store, eating dinner somewhere. It can be anywhere.
Right.
Could be the person next to you. You can't identify it until you can identify it. Which
Until you
now
trigger
whatever it is
something
that emotionally or physically that it triggers their emotions or feelings at the time.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's really serious, man. You never know. It could be accidents happen like that. You
gotta be aware too. In a lot of cases, it's with shootings and robberies. Sometimes you gotta kind of be aware. Sometimes you'll know. I've done it before. I know. This dude crazy, right? Yeah. But then you don't look at the obvious. Why he got a ski mask on?
Right.
You don't look at that.
Right.
And it's hot outside. Stuff like that. Like you gotta. I hate to use that example, but it happens. Like why this person got all black on in the middle of the summer? Yeah. You gotta take a step back and say, man, what's wrong? What's going on?
Well, now see, that would be mental illness.
Portion. Exactly.
That's some sort of mental illness.
Exactly.
But the ones who have, not the ones who have mental health issues, the psychology part, those are the ones you can't really
see. Yeah, can't gauge it at all.
But like you can identify that by what he's wearing because it makes no sense to have that on. So obviously you must be crazy.
Yeah.
You feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As opposed to
or about to do something crazy.
Right.
One of the two.
Right.
Yeah.
Or as opposed to me just breaking out into doing something crazy or I have emotional issues all the time,
So you got in some ways to educate, just like we're talking. Do you think it's okay? Do you think people feel safe to talk openly about it? Like, do you think it's something that should be mandatory, done in jobs, like place of employment, schools? Do you feel that it's safe for that discussion to be had?
I do.
Do you think it's something that's mandatory that should be occurring?
I do.
Which would help prevent a lot.
I do think so.
Of what folks are going through and dealing with.
Mm-hmm. I think it's important because if you're well enough to open up and talk about it, it gives you a mind frame to try to want to help yourself because it's kind of like admitting I have this issue and I want help.
Somewhat of an outlet, or not outlet, but you reaching out or saying,
or at least the people that you work with can know how to handle you or whatnot. You know what I mean? Because
handle might not be the right.
Because you know what I mean.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, no, a lot.
Not to expose a worker to or
like you say, it give them an idea on how to deal with you.
Yeah.
To definitely not want to trigger.
They do it.
But you got to be careful how you handle certain people, man. And I mean, and in a work environment is somewhat stressful.
Right.
So you're not knowing the stress of the other person that you're talking to.
You don't know what they're going through.
So you don't know what they're going through emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever they're dealing with. So you have to be kind of careful in the workplace how you deal with people.
How you communicate.
How you communicate is number one. And that's where most people have a problem because they don't know how to communicate right. They just blah, 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 and blab something. And now you like, well, wait a minute, where did that come from?
Now you done got the banana king pie and the cake.
Yeah, because the other person,
Yeah.
you triggered them.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. Now
You have a lot of folks also
Yeah.
that, you know, they don't like taking authority.
Right.
Or have a problem with authority.
Right.
And again, you know, the way maybe it's being delivered could often trigger one to go left. You know, which could cause an employee to go postal. You know,
Yeah,
and
I agree.
but you never know what one is going through. You know, we three of us were in the military and we went through boot camp. Now, do you think most veterans have a mental health issue based on, you know, the training that we had, just how, you know, the screaming, yelling, you know, we were young. So that from going from that, the environment that we were used to into what we were thrown in, you think that kind of affected us mentally?
So the short answer to that is I think that most veterans do have mental health issues. But I want to go back to something you said at the beginning of the episode where you stated that mental illness and mental health are two different things.
Right.
So I think a lot of times what happens is that because there's a fine line between the two,
Right.
we kind of intertwine them, right? So let me go deeper. So when I think of mental illness, I think of somebody that's mentally incompetent, that they may be, their brain hasn't been developed all the way, and they're mentally disabled to where they can't help themselves, and they're not growing. So, or they'll be looked at as handicapped. So those are the people that I think are mentally ill. Now, when it comes to mental health, I think that your mental health can be affected daily. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I can only speak of my community, but even prior to the military,
Yeah.
I think that because of the conditions that I come from, not so much as in the home, but in the community in which I grew up in, it was common to see drugs. Right. It was common to see police brutality. It was common to see all of the fights and alcoholism and all that stuff, right?
Right.
And I think that I was mentally conditioned to accept that, which affected my mental health. And so the way I look at it is kind of like, let's say I have a cold, right? Or the flu. I am actually ill at the moment. But if I take medication, then 2-3 weeks later, I no longer have the flu. I'm okay. So that's the health part of it. Mentally, I am not healthy. Just like when I had the flu, physically, I wasn't healthy. So in regards to the veterans, I think that most veterans have mental health issues and they can be triggered. That's where the PTSD comes in.
Right.
Post-traumatic stress.
That makes sense.
You went deep with that one, man. I wanted to touch back on you, someone that you were saying that was physically disabled, having a mental health issue, correct?
Yeah.
Mental,
So mentally like disabled.
I mean, because they actually fall under both categories, in my opinion, mental illness and mental health.
So you know what? I can see that. Like, let's use bipolar and schizophrenia, right? Those are medically diagnosed, right?
Correct.
But let's just say somebody cut me off in traffic and you done pissed me off, but I've never been diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia. You done pissed me off.
Yeah.
I'm in a bad mood.
Now
My mental health has been affected.
It's affected. Yeah.
You was good.
Now, let's say 2-3 hours later, after I listen to me some church music,
You all right?
I'm okay.
That's right.
Right? So now my mental health is back in order.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like taking that medicine
Right.
for the flu.
Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Got you. Yeah.
Understood. Great
So-
analogy.
You're right, because the illness would mean, can I get better?
And that's a question. Yeah, and that's a question I would
the
ask, because
illness
just like you said, you listen to some gospel. That the first question is the person with the mental illness or health or either one. Are they talking with God? Are they or their higher power? Right? Because everybody doesn't. Whoever you worship, are you talking to them? Yeah.
Well, depending on who's
Yeah.
let me dive into that, right?
Right.
Can I ask a question right before
Yeah.
you
Go-
make
no,
that
no,
dive?
Go ahead.
And I'm sure your response will touch on this, but do you think, fellas, that it's important to identify if one has one, or I think, like I said this early on, I think we all suffer from some type of mental illness. All four of us sitting at this table. Now, do you think knowing what our mental illness is helps, or not knowing or denying,
Well, so I think I understand the question. I think that in regards to not knowing, I think that if you don't know that there's some mental issues that you may have, that's because you've been conditioned to think that it was okay.
Right.
Yeah,
You've been
I agree.
conditioned to live that way.
Right.
okay,
And so that's probably why you don't know. And if you don't know, then it may appear that you're denying the fact that you have what you have, right?
correct.
Now, as far as being mentally ill, I don't believe, unless you can go to the doctor or therapist or whatever, and they diagnose you with being bipolar or diagnose you with being schizophrenic, and then they provide you medication. Hey, as long as you take your medications, you'll be balanced.
Right.
You'll be okay. Then you'll know it, that I have these issues, and I have to take medication for a lifetime with these issues, right? But so I think that with mental illnesses, some people don't know that they actually have a mental illness, and I don't think that they actually avoid it. They just don't know. Like for instance, someone that was born mentally retarded and can't even say their ABCs and speak. Yeah. They'll never really truly know that they're mentally ill,
Right.
because they're born that way.
They was born that way, right?
Where versus somebody that has a mental health issue, it's possibly they can get diagnosed, they can comprehend enough to know that, hey, this doctor told me something's wrong, I'm a little off mentally, and I have to take medicine to get better. And as long as I'm taking my medicine, I'll be able to function in society.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, man, and I think the conversation should be had more often than what's happening. So if you know somebody out there, just pay attention to what you observe. Be observant, and don't be afraid to talk about it. Freddie G, I don't know if you remember, but that was the terminology we had in the military. AFU, all fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when we leave this show today, Comedian 96, we're going to get them screened, because I don't know if they got a cure for that AFU, and I know it certainly falls under that mental illness. But folks, pay attention, and again, let's make this a better world. Peace. This concludes another True Tuesday episode, and be sure you tune in tomorrow for Women Wednesday with Freddie G. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at 52 Scott Podcast, on Instagram and Facebook, the 52 Scott Podcast. And for all you YouTubers, don't forget to like and subscribe. And to all my 52 Scott faithfuls, it may be new to you, but if you heard it here, then you know it's true.